So I know that in the act of going through the top one, I was using a lot of little tricks here, a lot of little commands like shape builder or circles and squares, etc. Shape building is probably the most fundamental thing to do in Illustrator, on top of like arranging things. But the idea is we just want to start building some basic shapes. So how do I, for example, make a little cell? So this could be an endothelial cell, it doesn't really matter. The two main keys are going to be M as in Mike and L as in Lima. So M, that's my rectangle tool. You have it selected over here. Again, I use the hotkeys. Don't click on them. Save yourself time. Learn them. And I have the rectangle tool selected. I can click and drag. I've got this weird dotted line thing from previously selected, whatever. Come over here, and I've made this square. This is fill. So if I want to change the fill here, I just click on a different color, doesn't matter. And if I want to change the stroke, it's this panel. Let's say I want to make it red, doesn't matter. So again, M is for rectangles, L is for ellipse. Another thing that's nice to know is, just like in most programs, if you hold shift, it maintains proportionality, so you make a perfect square. L and then hold shift while you're dragging makes a perfect circle. So really, really basic. If I want to, for example, make this little cell like I have here, everything's a basic shape, remember? So I come here, let's say I wanted to do this, doesn't really matter. Come over here, make that a little bigger. And I know that if I click and hold this, I can make a perfectly rounded rectangle, that's fine. If I want to copy the fill and the stroke of something, I can use the eyedropper tool, and now you'll see that my mouse is a little eyedropper. I just click on that I want to copy, and then it's copied both the fill and the stroke, so it makes it a little faster. I can come in, direct selection tool, A, I can choose just this one anchor point, and I can actually move it, and with these little handles I can change curvature, I can really make it whatever I want. So you can always be fiddling around these things. There's multiple ways to make a figure, make a shape. That doesn't really matter. Kind of is whatever you want it to be. So we've got that little cell. We'll make an ellipse as its nucleus, and we can flatten that a little bit. And hey, Shift X, swap stroke and fill. And then we come back over here, and then just get rid of the stroke. So that's how you can make a little version of this cell. There's different ways to do it, but you get the idea. One thing is the shape builder tool. So this is really convenient for fusing things together or trimming. There's lots of different options. So let's say I've made these four little circles. I'm gonna make a copy of that here, Shift while using the ellipse tool. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna copy this by holding the Alt key, and I'm gonna move in orthogonal increment by holding Shift. So now when I'm holding Shift, I can either move it perfectly horizontally or perfectly vertically. So again, it helps you really snap a little bit easier moving orthogonally. I like that. I'm gonna highlight these two things, click and drag. I'm gonna hold Alt to copy, and then I'm gonna hold Shift to move orthogonally. So I'm gonna drag that and snap that to, something like there. Doesn't really matter. So I've made this type of, 4 overlapping circles really quickly doing this. And so say I like that, I like how that looks. Paste in place, Control Shift V, move it over, and I'm already working non-destructively. I've got this thing ready to go. And say I want to make this little star, I can highlight all these things, and we're going to use what's called the Shape Builder tool. So this is something over on the side panel, Shift M to use it. So again, it's Shape Builder tool. And all that this does is it allows me to fuse or trim strokes and fill to make something more complex. So you see right now my cursor has a plus on it. This means that I just click and I drag. I'm only clicking and dragging and connecting these loops together. And it's drawing this pathway. And if I let go, it's just fused those things together. So it should ideally have made a little different shape. So if I wanted to swap stroke and fill, I can do that really quickly. So another thing is, let's say, come back in here. Remember the idea that if I hold Alt, it does the opposite. So I want to fuse these things together. I want to trim this one. I'm going to hold the Alt option to trim that out. I want to actually just delete this whole little thing in here. It'll be hard to visualize that. I want to trim that piece off. I'm going to hold Alt. I want to fuse these 4 things. I want to trim this by holding Alt. And then all of a sudden, you've just really quickly been able to make more complex shapes with the Shape Builder tool. What we will ultimately do in a later bit is to make a pattern brush to perfectly and quickly make something like a little artery or a capillary using that endothelial cell that we drew over here. So we'll get to that actually in the future. The lines and strokes panel is, again, a pretty basic piece of navigation. So you hit the / key. I always hit L from CAD, but it's actually the / key. And now, really just simple line option, click and drag. What I recommend you explore in your own time is you come down to the strokes panel. Obviously, change your weight. It doesn't really matter. Change the caps. Do I want them to be rounded? Do I want them to be extended but still square, etc., etc.? Can make it a dashed line. So you come over here and make it dashed lines. Change the spacing, 1 point, make it 2, doesn't matter. If you want to make a circular dotted line, you could say, come over here, change this, make this 0. I need to remember how to do this, but if you play around with this, you can actually make these perfectly circular dotted lines just by changing weights and making them dash and stuff. Something else that is nice are how do I do arrowheads and how do I do rectangular boxes. So again, all of this is, I'm gonna copy this little arrow, highlight it, stroke panel, and then your arrowheads options are just down here. Perfect example of how does your lab establish their arrowheads. Click on this, maybe your PI likes arrowhead number 9. Hey, that looks huge. Well, you can change it. Come over here, highlight that 33%, and now it's something a little more reasonable. This is something where it's pretty straightforward to understand, but you can really explore what you want to do with this. Say I like arrowhead 2, I want to swap it, so I hit this thing. Pretty basic stuff. So arrowheads, as long as everyone's doing the same arrowhead, you'll be totally fine. I've made a dotted rectangle here, so you can come over here and you'll notice I can either change where those dots, the dashes actually intersect. So I think that this option looks way cleaner where you have that dash split perfectly on the corner. So if you're doing like a call out box or something, say I want to make this a smaller dotted line. I want there to be a 1 point gap as well, or I want this to be 4 dash. This doesn't really look that good. It's a little bit off, right? So just knowing that you can change the centering of your dashes to get that to look really clean is another thing that just helps a little bit, the small details that really make your thing look way cleaner. Another thing to note is I can also change where that stroke is falling. So I can have it, if we make it a solid line, I can have that stroke. Currently it's, equally dispersed from this green line. I can have it be in the center. I can have it start from the outside and go 3 points out. Just more things to know. You can control pretty much everything, but play around with this panel. It's pretty fun, pretty basic shapes. Really nothing can go too wrong. Text and character panel. These two are not, not super confusing. They're pretty straightforward. The main things that you change with the text and character panel are whether you're doing free text or text within a box. So if I just hit T for text and I click, it's going to come up, with the gibberish. I guess not, but whatever. And I can just start typing and typing and typing, and it's just going to keep going and going until I hit enter, and so on and so forth. So that's a free text option. I don't really like it that much. But the other thing that you can do is you can, with the text tool, is click and drag. And now I have a box. So when I start typing and I hit the end of that box, it returns. And this is something that people normally, they kind of forget that they had done one or the other. They had clicked over here. It was going on forever. They hit return whatever. They had made a separate thing for a call out box. They actually had something to snap to. So they could start typing. Just so you know, there's 2 different options, free text or text within a box. You obviously have the same control with these things like you do with like in Microsoft Word. So I can come over here. You'll notice properties panel, I can scroll down, actually shift this up to give myself a little more space. And I have this character panel. And again, This plus all the additional options here, you can really make whatever you want. If you want to make this, superscript or subscript, it doesn't matter. Everything's in here. I can come in here. If I want to just make the word text bold, I can come in here, type the letter B, and it will know, and make it even bigger, change the spacing and stuff. So everything that you need in terms of superscripts and subscripts, italices, whatever is in here. We won't talk that much about the idea of kerning and tracking. What I do want you to know is, again, you can change anything about the text that you want. So you'll notice right here, I think this is either the kerning or the tracking. It just says optical. So all that it's checking for is that some of these things aren't really running into one another in terms of smushing these letters together horizontally. If I come over here, and what I had done was really smush them together, what I want to highlight is this idea of kerning. The worst thing that can happen is that you have two letters that smush together to look like a different letter. So properly spaced, you can tell it's the word kerning. And then if they get smushed together where you don't have enough spacing, it looks like chemming. So it just looks like a typo. So what you'll do is you can fix this. You come over to the character panel. You can just set it at 0. You can set it at whatever you want. This is really helpful if you're just trying to squish a few letters together because it's about to run off of a page or run off of a box or something. Like, I just really need those just a little bit closer together, and all of a sudden things can start working. So again, still legible. Just so you know, you can change things like vertical and horizontal spacing of letters or even words in a paragraph. So there's really not too much just to go into for the text options here. For lines, there are, I would say, 2 to 3 major line types here in Adobe. One of them is a little bit user-friendly and the other one is less so. So we'll actually start by talking about the curvature tool. So the curvature tool is a little bit neat. I'm going to start by drawing a line using the slash button, and I'll just come over here and I'll just draw a horizontal line, give it some stroke, otherwise it wouldn't be visible. And if I come over and I hit the line curvature tool, which is Shift tilde, what I'm able to do now that I have that line selected is start bending it. So before, it was just a straight line without the line curvature tool. I wasn't able to do this, but I can come in and I can warp this a little bit. Way easier to use for beginners than something like the pen tool, in my opinion. However, I do think the pen tool is slightly more powerful. It's just a little less easy to use for beginners. So the pen tool, I just press P. All of a sudden I have the pen tool. What is important to note, I think what throws people off is starting a line with the pen tool is different than the subsequent points you make. So I will just click and I've got one anchor point. I'm not holding anything down. I just clicked. All subsequent points I'm going to make by clicking and dragging. So I'm going to click and hold, and then I got all these nice little smooth connections that I can make. I say right there looks good. And then now I have this continuous line that it wants me to make. I'll go over here, click and hold, and I'm holding my mouse down the whole time while I'm doing this. Normally what confuses people with the pen tool is they'll click and drag immediately. Well, what the heck was that? And then I'm gonna just click, and then all of a sudden I have a straight line coming off. It's a little less user-friendly, I'd say, but you can make, I think, curves that are a little bit smoother and sleeker with the pen tool. It just has a higher learning curve. So with that being said, let's say, for example, that I liked one of these curves and another one. We can see the skeleton of these lines of 2 different weights with the outline tool, Command Y. All I have at the end of the day is still just 2 little thin lines, one's bifurcating off of another. Say I'm trying to draw a cartoon of a blood vessel or something. So I've come in here, I've made, we can even do this with the pen tool. We can say I want to do this to here, that looks fine. And then there, have that snap and whatever. Looks pretty similar. Another thing that can be really game-changing is knowing what the line width tool does. So if I have this line and I just make it fatter, it's uniformly fatter across the whole line. It's uniformly thinner if I toggle this. And I can also, equations times 1.2, doesn't matter. The line width tool actually allows me to dynamically change the width of this line instead of having everything be uniform. So I think that's Shift W. I still got it. I do. Okay. Yeah, line width tool, Shift W. We'll zoom in here. I'll go back to this. And now you'll notice I can come over here and I can select this, and I can actually change the width of this line where I want. And maybe right here, if I need to make a new point or something, I can change that too. But I get a really nice smooth gradient from what I need. And so let's say I wanted to go back to smooth caps. I'm trying to make something that looks like a nice smooth blood vessel or whatever. Can also change things like the caps because I know that option exists. I can also make this one have different weight to it as well. So I've got, again, the line width tool, made it this one a little fatter. Hey, it's kind of hard to see. Well, let's go to outline mode. And then we can come back in here, change what we want, swap back, Control Y. And so I've just made a variable line width throughout the length of the line.